So welcome, Sharon, to Listen Up podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's start from the offset. Sharon, you're second generation West Indian. You define yourself as black, gay, and a visual artist who's based in Dorset, UK. I'm not sure which way round you define yourself as, whether you're Sharon, parent of 3 children, who has been on Countdown and 15 to 1 and won a ton of money. Just within that insightful statement, there is already a lot to unpack. Yeah, let's talk about your work as a fine artist. You studied at the renowned Camberwell School of Art, gaining an MA in printmaking, and it is noted that you draw from different styles and influences, and on your website it refers to you as a Renaissance woman, drawing from the knowledge of jewellery making, bookmaking, paper making alongside your printmaking. Your inspirations are many and varied, including all the heavyweight subjects: life, death, sex and sexuality, and birth, often injecting humour and hidden meaning within your work. Let's talk about something that you're working on at the moment, Sharon.
Okay, well, I'm never just working on one thing. I, when I say I'm a Renaissance woman, what I actually mean by that is that I'm constantly inspired by a range of things. So I know that there are artists that will say, landscape is my thing, and they will paint it and they will paint it and they will paint it. And, you know, they become renowned for being landscape painters. I could never be that, because I might be a landscape painter on Tuesday and an abstract painter on a Wednesday and a figurative painter on a Thursday, because I find life too inspirational. I find too much out there in the world that I think, oh, that's interesting. My life and the life of everyone. And so what I'm working on at the moment, I'm working on some of my BLM Black Lives Matters big images. I'm working on some paintings about buildings, and I'm working on a book which is just exploring colour and texture. And I like to have my finger in lots of different pies creatively, so that I can kind of let one influence the other a little bit. I just could never be the person that just did one thing. And so I say the Renaissance woman is because I'm a painter, I'm a drawer, I'm a printmaker. I make installations, I make books, I make whatever I feel the need to make, I make it. So, you know, that's
Interesting.
but so there are 3 sort of things that I'm working on at the moment.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more detail about your Black Lives Matter series shortly. But you've also talked, and I've seen some of your work that's very much embedded in nature. And there is a series on bees that you've done. And I'd love to see that work across Dorset. I've spoken to you about it before. I'd love to see it outdoor, site-specific, large scale. But the detail that goes into making these popular pieces, could you talk through that process with us?
Okay, so the bees came about when my son was born. It was because I didn't really have the mental headspace, the capacity to think of artwork. It was kind of like I had the need and the desire to make something, but I didn't really have the mental space to think of that thing. And quite often I will revert to figurative drawing. So for that, when he was really tiny, I drew a bee. I found it in the garden, dead, and I just came to work, put it in a little pot, and I drew it. And it just grew from there, really. And then I realised that actually drawing the bees, and it was like a form of meditation when you concentrate and look at detail in that way. It allows your brain to to think of other things. It's a really odd experience, but it's a good one. It's a good experience. But and then I drew another bee, and then I drew another bee. And then as soon as people started to see the bees, people started to want to buy the bees. And then, so I was I draw a bee, and then I'd sell a bee. And then I think, oh, well, I'll draw another one just for me. I'm going to have this bee. It's my bee. And then I draw it, and then I would sell it, which is great because, you know, obviously selling work is great. But, you know, drawing, and it's so underrated. A lot of people say they can't draw, but drawing frees your mind in a way that a lot of other things don't, because it doesn't matter about the outcome. I know writing, if you just wrote and wrote and wrote, it would, you know, it could just be gobbledygook and not make any sense at all. Whereas a drawing, if it didn't make any sense, that wouldn't actually matter. It was the fact that you did it in the first place. So yeah, the bees were they lasted 2 years. I mean, anyone who's had a baby knows that first couple of years is a blur. And so it did last a good 2 years of just drawing bees. I drew a lot of bees. I estimated that I probably drew about, I think something like 250 bees.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of meditation.
A lot of bees.
Yeah.
I love them so.
Oh gosh, the detail that you have in them is unbelievable. It's beautiful. You also, so that's interesting that you talk about that kind of process. You also talk about your work, and you define it more as more possibly emotive. What's the process like in creating that type of work?
Ooh, it takes me a lot longer to think about. Like the sort of the big bodies of work that I've done that are very personal to me as well. I was thinking about, for example, I did a body of work about the way my son was conceived, and the IVF process, and that took me the full 2 years of bee drawings to think about. So the stuff that is more emotive and from me takes a lot longer to think about. It is not something I can just sit down and do. I have to really think about it. And so they're kind of like really big projects that almost, I've always got one of those on the back burner. I'm always thinking about a big project whilst I'm doing lots of other projects. Yeah. So, you know, they take a lot of thought, and I know it isn't about sitting and drawing or anything like that. It's really about thinking how you want to communicate something in a way that is true to the experience and authentic, and also true to the thing you're trying to communicate. So yeah,
it's so multi-layered, isn't it? Yeah, so it's a lot of research that goes into it, whether it's your own thoughts and feelings and emotions and banking
research. I do a lot of research. That is something I do, and for background, which is kind of the BLM stuff. Really, that's where it started. That was, I read books and books, because I felt I couldn't believe how little I knew about my own heritage. I was a little bit ashamed of myself for knowing so little.
Let's talk about the Black Lives Matter series. So when did this start, this series of Black Lives Matter, or exploring your own heritage for this series? Okay,
so it started with a piece called Lifetime Archipelago, where I did a triptych which was looking at my life in 3 chapters. So each image covered 10 years of my life, so it was up to sort of my 30s. And what happened then, when you start to work from yourself, you start to think about things that you haven't thought about. So I made this 3-piece triptych of work, and it really got me thinking. I thought, oh, you know, I haven't really thought about putting these things together in any kind of visual way before. And then weirdly, I sold that piece to a guy who fell in love with it, which was really odd, because I never saw it as a commercially viable piece of art. I saw it as a piece of art that I made to kind of do that thing and talk about those 3 decades of my life. And this guy just was like, oh, I love it, and it's so great. But then I kind of was like, right, now I've started this, I actually need to dig much deeper into it. And that started with the next project, which was Blackground, which was looking at my ancestral heritage from St. Kitts and the slave trade and my family's relationship with that, and, you know, starting to really understand the real history behind my own history. And yeah, I read a lot of books, and it's a very funny thing because a lot of Black families don't talk about it.
Interesting.
You know, it's something that happens that people, you know, there's an acknowledgement. I mean, when I told my dad this is what I was doing, all of a sudden he was like, oh, well, you should read this and look at that. Wow. And bear in mind, I'm 50, and that work I did at 48. And he's at 48, he started to tell me, oh, well, this is this and this is that at 48. And I kind of thought, whoa, you know, that is quite a crazy thing to have got to quite that age. And had I not been doing this body of work, would he ever have discussed it with me? And
that's really interesting, isn't it? Do you think he's still trying to protect you as, you know, as his daughter? Sometimes people don't like to expose their children to emotions or feelings that they felt themselves. You know, we go into that protective mode. I mean, it's strange that he's taken till you were 48 and that for you to express it, but I just wondered what his thinking is. I just think that maternal part was, I don't know, it'd be interesting to find out why, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be though, right? But what's really interesting about that though is that I'm the exact opposite with my own kids, because I'm like, you need to know everything, you know. And in a way, this body of work, that body of work, and this current BLM work is they're joined. They're part of the same thing, really. But I very much see it as I'm doing that for my kids. That's how I see it, you know.
So you've talked about 2 different separate series to do with Black Lives Matter, as I'm looking at your own heritage, but you've also got a current series as well. Do you want to just share with the listeners about that as well? Okay,
so it just so happened that, you know, during lockdown, the awful events happening in America just triggered my feeling that I needed to add to this earlier series of work and actually create visual responses that visually acknowledged what was currently going on, as opposed to just, you know, all of my history. I wanted it to be like, this is what's going on. So there's a series of 4 drawings / paintings, and they're looking at the idea of the rising tide of racism and the right wing, and also this other, I find it really invasive, this racism that seems to be happening behind the security of keyboards and people, you know, I've started to look at what people write in comments about posts to do Black Lives Matters, and what's really interesting is that, you know, there's this people, I think there are people that are overtly being just racist. I think there's overt, and then I think there's covert, and then I think there's people that have no idea that they are being either. And so I wanted to kind of visually address that. So Catch a Fire, which is a piece I did, was looking at the idea of that this trickle effect that it has when people do these things and they just fire it off and they don't really think about it, but they don't think about who it touches and who sees it and how that impacts on them, and, you know, how that makes people feel. You know, so I wanted to actually document things in historically correct time, you know, so it is what we're going through right now. And that was really important, because I think, you know, the piece I'm working on at the moment is taking me for absolute ever, because it's an image of a BLM protest that's happened in lockdown, where all the protesters are wearing masks. And it's a really difficult thing to depict visually if you're drawing faces with masks on. But I really wanted to have this block of work that showed 2020, you know, that this was happening, and that it wasn't just, you know, talking about things historically. That I wanted to have something that was contemporary, and show, you know, the reality of what has been going on. You know, and I know there was a lot of controversy about the people marching in a time where, you know, we're in a pandemic, and there was a lot said about that, but a lot less was said about people going en masse to beaches and en masse to other things, you know. And you kind of go, well, the necessity to go to the beach compared to the necessity to march about our civil rights, you know, it seemed crazy, and I wanted to document it, and I wanted it to be part of this bigger body of work. You know, I've said it before. I feel that, you know, the artists who are tackling what's going on now in the world, generally what's going on now in the world, you know, in the future will be seen as the true documentarians of these times, because that some people may have a bit of an agenda, but, you know, when you start to look at people who have been depicting either the riots that have happened, or the demonstrations that have happened, or indeed like the people that have been painting the NHS heroes, you know, that like, you know, across the board of this time, the artists that are working with these subject matters, you know, will be in the future will be hugely referenced, because you know, that is what happens historically. You know, they'll be hanging in galleries, and people will say, you know, this was done during the pandemic. You know, and it will be important work. Yeah, it's interesting.
It needs to carry on, doesn't it? I think we're at that time now, because for some artists that I've spoken to, it's been a time when they haven't felt creative, and then some people have felt very creative, and then there's this unraveling time now about things coming to the surface a lot more. And so, you know, it's possibly a time where more creativity will start to happen, and those things that you're talking about, there'll be that reflection and that archiving through a creative medium, whatever that creative medium is.
And be made.
I hope so, because it's quite a difficult time in the creative industry sector, for work and things like that. So for artists to feel valued and to be able to make a living out of it, you know, is quite it's quite tough. It's a very passionate thing, so we get on and do it, don't we, you know, but it's our jobs and our careers and things like that, and that needs to be valued. And what I just wanted to come back to is that you talked about how one of the pieces that you did with the Black Lives Matter, it was speaking from your soul, from your heart, and you didn't think that it was going to be a selling piece, and that you spoke your truth, and that somebody was really interested in buying it. And so that interests me in a sense of how we're processing something and it's actually a selling point. But you've also been quite active on selling through lockdown. And I just wondered if you could share with us what's been your successful routes to market, just like something that I've just touched on there. But are there other ways that you've been able to be successful during this time that you could share?
Matthew Burrows, an artist, he set up the Artist Support Pledge, which is a great movement, and I saw today that it's now already 6 months old, and that's just a free platform for people to use the hashtag and put their work up for sale, no commission, and you can sell you have to pledge that if you make £1,000, that you'll reinvest 200 of that in buying another artist's work.
Oh wow!
Or other artists' work, and that has been great. I think honesty has been a really good way to sell things, because I don't think people realise that, you know, livelihoods have been lost. You know, when most artists, not all artists, most artists will run workshops, do some form of teaching. You know, there'll be an income flow that allows them to be artists, and for most artists that stopped, and some artists have been able to restart that, and now may have to stop again with the current guidelines. And you know, this idea that all of a sudden this thing that was your life would just cut off, that was a scary thing. For, you know, everyone in the creative industries who's suffered from that. It was a scary time, especially if you've got mortgages and just lives. If just if you're alive. I mean, that's the thing. It's not even, you don't even have to have a specific bill to pay. It's just any bill to pay. I sort of approached my Facebook followers and Instagram followers and Twitter and said, you know, I've got this stuff for sale. I make art, you know, I'm not making any money now. And I'm really lucky that there are people that have collected my work in the past who were able to buy and support me that way. And new people have found me and wanted to buy the work, and my work. So that's been great. But, you know, I think anyone who makes anything, you need to look at the Artist Support Pledge as a viable way of getting your work out there, because it's got a massive following, and you know, it really doesn't cost you anything.
So just moving on slightly, you talked about your artwork and yourself. What things or who inspires you and guides you to help navigate your creativity?
I don't know. I just have to, like I said earlier, I just think this morning, this is an answer. It might not sound like it, but it is. This morning, I was looking out the bathroom window, okay, and we've got the big cruise ships on the bay, on Swanage Bay, on the bay, yeah? And the light was hitting the end of the cruise ship. So the cruise ship was like purpley, and then the end of the cruise ship was bright orange, and you had the horizontal darker purple, and the sky was a lighter purple. And I thought that'd make a great painting. Okay, and that's how my life is. I look at things, and it just instantly, I think something, and I think, I'm gonna have to think about that a bit more. And there isn't any one single thing. It just is. It is constant. Funnily enough, we didn't really talk about it, but we did talk about lockdown. But the beginning of lockdown, I couldn't do what I did this morning. Okay, looked out the window, did all of that. Thought, wow, that would make a great painting. I could, at the beginning of lockdown, that first sort of 6 weeks of lockdown, I couldn't think like that. My head wouldn't let me. I found it too intense. My head was too full of panic and worry and stress to think like that. So, you know, that's the difference in terms of creativity. And I know we talked about it briefly, but I would have probably just been staring out the window and not seeing anything particularly. So, everything inspires me. You know, and I feel like that's not the best answer, but it's the only answer I really have. I'm constant. I never struggle generally to come up with something to do. So.
I think your answer is really revealing. It speaks in so many different layers. You know, it's not always about people all the time. It's about moments in time, and just to show that timeline of creativity and how you've navigated it and where you are now is really insightful. So thank you for sharing your honesty there. You define yourself as black and gay. This is your experience. And it might be that it's nuanced with other overlapping independent systems of discrimination or social barriers that I haven't gone into. That how has black and being gay, if that's how you define yourself, informed your decisions as an artist? And if you like, you want to expand as a parent as well.
I think, you know, if you're filling in an application form, I literally tick all the boxes. You know, I literally tick all the boxes in that respect. I think being gay is not a barrier in terms of anything really, because that's your own business, and I don't think I don't hide it. Although that's not true, I probably do hide it actually, because being black and gay is not the best thing in the world. You know, that isn't it has never been, and as far as we have come, it still isn't. You know, it still isn't. It's got in my own family incredibly homophobic members of my own family. So, you know, my own family. So that means that it isn't something that is ever really spoken about. So, you know, it is, even though I say it isn't a thing that I really think about with my work. I've definitely used it in my work and discussed it within my work, and I've also discussed the taboo of it in the black culture in my work, you know, because I think that is a really, you know, no one can kid themselves that, you know, that being black and gay is okay, because whilst it is okay, and I know it's okay, it isn't okay for a lot of people still. And, you know, there is still a lot of black people who have to live their lives very much on the quiet and behind closed doors, because they would have issues as a result of it. Parenting, it's funny, kids are so much cooler about things. You know, my kids are fine, and what their friends are really jealous that they have two mums. If anything, they're jealous about it, and think it's really awesome, because there's this bond that mums have with their kids that dads somehow don't tend to have. I don't know what it is. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we're better, but there's this bond, and the idea that you've got two of them seems to be, like, to most other kids, seems to be the best thing ever. And you know, so that, you know, is a no-brainer. And we're open with them about everything. You know, they know how they came into the world. You know, so that's it's not really an issue. But I do think that there's more of an issue with the whole black and gay. I don't think being black and an artist has an issue. I think. I think being black and gay as an artist, it isn't. I really do believe I've had more barriers being black than gay, because it's not, obviously people might look at me and think, oh, she's gay, or they might not, I don't even know, but it's never really been an issue. That hasn't been an issue. I think being black, I've found that the black bit of that question has been, I've found much more of an issue with. I've definitely had, experientially, I've had people not necessarily take me as seriously as I feel they should take me. I've definitely been overlooked, and you know, my kind of coverage if you like, in terms of exposure compared to my white peers who've done similar things, has been completely incomparable. You know, if you think that I was the first black female gay owner of an independent gallery in Dorset, at no point was that represented anywhere or covered anywhere, and that's actually a really big deal. I mean, you know, that is a big deal. But conversely, when other people have opened galleries and have got a ton of coverage, and really they're just actually carrying on something that's always happened, not something that had never happened before. Do you see what I mean? So it was, and you know, I would face that kind of overlookedness quite often, and it's not even to do with me not putting my hand out and doing press release. It wasn't even like that. I mean, it was just like a non-event on the cultural map, and I think, you know, even being in the gallery when it was a gallery, you know, people would defer to the white person in the room as the owner. If there was a white person in the room, people would defer to that person as the owner. They would never approach me. And so I'll tell you an interesting fact. When Shirley, who used to work for me, who was a 50-plus-year-old white, one of my best friends, woman, she would sell more of my work than I would if she was in the gallery and I wasn't in the gallery.
First of all, let's celebrate and value what you've been doing in Dorset, you know, as, like you say, a black female gay, you know, just being a black gallery owner, you know, needs to be celebrated. And because it brings so much richness, and I think just with that intersectionality of being gay as well, you put a completely different lens on the norm as well. So all those different layers bring, like you just said, there's the normal thing going on, and that should be celebrated. It's possibly that you're too advanced for
there is that,
you know, because this area wants to be a city, but we need to embrace city mentality. And sometimes people come along and they have a city mindset already, you know, so you're programming stuff that is for a city mindset, and just even your own presence is a city mindset. So that's what I mean by we're sometimes too advanced for what the area is. Yeah. So I just want to celebrate. Right. I want to celebrate what you've achieved and what you've done as this moment in time, really, because I think it should. And because the richness of diversity adds to the value of the area, and I think that conversation needs to keep coming up and keep happening. There's been this moment now with Black Lives Matter that people have educated themselves more, and they become a bit more woke to everything, and actually start to realise, whether that's in a monetary value or whether that's in an inclusivity of different approaches and being woken up to that. But this is an ongoing conversation. This is not just something that happens for a blip. There's people that have been doing work like yourselves and many other artists that have been doing this work and will continue to do the work and to have the lens that they have. And I just hope that platform changes and that value changes for many people that are working in the area, because it doesn't fit the norm of what is aesthetic and what is culture. And so that, I feel, is different, and I think it's great, you know. But that's just my thinking, because, you know, I have a different kind of suitcase to some people that live here, and you know, we all do, don't we? So people hopefully will become more woke and that will carry on. And if not, then we carry on the conversation. We carry on doing what we've always been doing, you know.
I think that's the truth.
And just coming back off my pedal stool. And I just want to have some of your input, really, and your thoughts around this. Young people I speak to, and I can only draw from my own relationships, is that my teenage child, we have conversations about pronouns, cis male, female, gender fluid, transgender. What are your thoughts on the new norm of defining gender?
Well, honestly, I find it a bit confusing, and that, you know, I feel like I shouldn't, but I do. I find it confusing. I don't have an issue with it. I just find it confusing, and I would worry that I would incorrectly, get it wrong. I just get it wrong. I would get it wrong. In terms of, I think it's a good thing that there is this kind of idea that there is no one box, because I clearly don't fit into one box, just me. So, you know, I think it's good that we're saying, right, yeah, there are more ways to actually be and live your life. I do have a few concerns about, but it's not necessarily about the gender. I do have a few concerns, because I've seen a lot of things recently where the word woman and women is under attack. It's under attack, and you know that we shouldn't be allowed to identify as that because it's against everything else. And I'm not really happy with that, because I think, you know, this idea of inclusivity surely you have to include everybody, and I don't think we should start saying that women is, and saying women. What was it? I read recently about woman from birth, or there was this weird kind of way of saying it, and I just thought, whoa, okay. I don't think we have to go that far, you know. If I want to identify as a woman, a black gay woman, then that's who I am. I don't want to have to not offend someone by the word woman. I mean, black and gay, fair enough. I understand the historical offence that could cause. You know, I understand. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying I understand that. Yeah. But when woman comes under fire, you're a bit like, whoa. I don't feel like I should just be able to say, right now, I'm a man. But that seems a bit odd. If I felt like I wanted to identify as a man and be Mr., that would be one thing. But to sort of just be able to say, this is who I am.
It's about self-defining, and there is going to be a continuous discourse, and names and terminology will continue to evolve.
I think so.
I think this is quite, just as much as BAME and POC, POC are... I
didn't even know. I've seen POC on things and not known it was me.
You know, and it's just moving in this way, and there is a lot of discourse, or, you know, people that just want to chop BAME up. What does it actually mean? What does POC mean? POC mean? And it's the same, I think, for people that are going through the identity of gender and the terminology that's there. I'm sure some people fully embrace it, but it's about self-defining.
I think the other thing that is important, I think educationally is important. I think it's really important for young people, and I mean from kids up to teens, including teens, that they're taught about all kinds of sexualities, and that there is a normalising in terms of that, you know, I think girls should understand that it's perfectly normal to have a crush on a girl. That doesn't make them a gay or a lesbian person. That just is That's just a normal thing, and boys should understand the same. And I would like to see education really hammering home those things, that side of things, that there is a normality to that, and that you know, developmentally, those things are just normal. That's a normal thing, and that, you know, you don't have to freak out and tell everyone and make big statements and put yourself in any kind of box about these things. That, do you see what I mean? Like, so that people aren't making other decisions based on things that aren't right. You know, that there is a clear kind of a spectrum of things that are just everyone experiences. That pretty much everyone experiences, and that is life. And, you know, I worry people will jump to put themselves in the wrong box by not having enough knowledge of the...
Yeah, that it's a process of exploration, and while you go through that identity,
exactly,
as a teenager, you know?
Yeah, and, exactly. You know, and it, you know, sometimes I think things might settle for people and be like, oh, I'm gay, or I'm bisexual, or I'm straight, or whatever. Things might settle, and then there might be other people who it never really settles for. You know, do you know what I mean? Because that's who they are. That's who they are. Yeah. And I think, you know, I've got to this ripe old age, and I fully realise that you know, it isn't as straightforward as, you know. No, you know, some people know things early on in their lives, and some people don't.
Yeah.
And some people have the freedom to know things early in their life, and some people don't.
We're going to just talk about representation. I'm going to draw from a TV programme. So Michaela Cole has made a TV programme on BBC and HBO called I May Destroy You. It explores many subplots around rape and presents a window into black gay men dating. There are scenes of two men affectionately kissing and much more. So what are your thoughts on the TV programme, and also thinking about same-sex representation and narratives in mainstream media, Sharon?
Okay. Firstly, I think it was one of the best written bits of telly I've seen in a long time. I really thought it was so powerful, and I did not know from episode to episode exactly where it was going. You know, even though the narrative was kind of clear, but really, really powerfully written. And in terms of, I thought what's interesting to me, and I am answering your question, her portrayal of rape, the R word, having known people and friends and good friends who've experienced that, totally made me understand it better. And there are things that shock me in my life, and that was one of them, that I felt that I understood that better as a result of watching that. Whereas I have seen women raped. I know but I've seen women raped in other programs, and, you know, it dealt with in other programs, but I didn't feel like I had a better understanding of it as a result of watching it. I just felt that I'd seen something horrible, and, you know, that the way in which it unravelled, and, you know, she started to understand it herself, it really made me feel like I was understanding it myself as well, even though, you know, I thought it was just really, really cleverly written. It really was. And, you know, it did actually prompt me to phone a friend and talk about their experience.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I was like, I now understand that more, and I didn't feel like I had previously. So yeah, powerful. I think the depiction of two black guys, you know, having sex was so shocking. It was shocking in as much as I was surprised the BBC allowed that to go as far as that. And, you know, going back to my earlier comment to the last set of questions, you know, the more we see the reality of love, or sex, or that, in that case it was just sex, but normalised, that it is a normal thing. It isn't this unnatural thing, and it isn't from a dark place. Let's say that really, the downside for me of that story, that kind of depiction, was the gay black guy in it, who was obviously needed to be fixed. He was a bit broken in his own way, but I mean, it wasn't a positive depiction. It wasn't a positive. It would have been not. I'm not saying it should have been, because it was real, it was true, and it was honest. There is no denial of that. There is no denial of that. But I feel like it's just a shame that it was a negative depiction and not a positive depiction. It was a slightly missed opportunity in that respect, because I mean, they did turn it around, because he did meet a guy at the end who wanted to date him and do things right and whatever, you know, and that was great. But, you know, to sort of, yeah. But the truth is, it was a true depiction of a gay bloke, and that you can't deny. I know enough of them. It was a true depiction. So, but, you know, it just was quite not the most positive. You know, and I think that in terms of seeing same-sex relationships on television, you know, it should just be the norm.
We're going to take us back to your work. You are also a curator, and you've owned your own gallery. What was your drive to curate, and was there a body of work or aesthetic you like to present?
Okay. I wanted to have a gallery that showed work that made people think. I didn't want to represent what I felt was already really well represented. Ultimately, you know, I live in a place which is by the seaside, and seascapes and landscapes are everywhere, and I did not want to do that. I wanted to show people that there was a different kind of art being made in Dorset by people by artists who saw things differently, really. And so, you know, I pretty much never showed traditional figurative painting and drawing. And it's not because I'm anti it, actually, because I had a show myself here, which was nearly 80% figurative. And it's not that it's more to do with the idea of giving people something new and something different. So, like, when I was curating exhibitions, I was really looking for work that was nothing to do with the sea. And if it was to do with the sea, didn't necessarily look like the sea at all. Because I was like, I'm not that interested in things. And, you know, I'd regularly have artists contact me and say, oh, I've got this amazing body of work and it's all based on the Purbex. And you'd be like, oh, great. Not for me, thanks. Because it isn't, you know, I find the sort of work that I wanted to show the work that I wanted to see, ultimately. And that was the work that made me go, whoa. And it wasn't necessarily always work I liked either, because that would have been a mistake. I think if you do curate and you curate well or properly, you should put work on that evokes every emotion, you know, from love it to loathe it. And, you know, it is as valid for a piece of art to make you recoil as it is for you to be in awe and think this is the best thing I've seen. And, you know, both of them will make you go away and talk about them. Yeah. both of those things. If you hate it, I went to see this thing, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. I went to see this thing and I loved it. It was so beautiful.
So we've talked briefly off screen about the commissioning process in the visual arts sector. And in my work, it comes up in the freelance task force and in conversations with What Next Dorset. This is generally a commissioning process that needs to change, and transparency is welcomed by freelancers. What is your thoughts on the commissioning process that you've noticed across the UK?
Oh, well, you can all tune into my blog because I'm just writing one about it. It's really interesting because I've been, you know, starting to research that for myself, looking for opportunities. You know, looking to see what's out there. You know, I still need to make a living. I want to see what's out there, things that I can apply for. And what's really interesting at the moment is that there are quite a lot of opportunities that seem to be coming up for Black, gay, creative artists, whatever, and they're specifically, and women. And they're specifically saying this in their opportunities, that's what they're looking for, and initially you sort of think, brilliant, I tick all of those boxes, and then you read more, and then you know, quite often I'm coming away thinking I'm not going to apply for that because somehow they're saying that they want to represent these people from these areas. They're saying, you know, you're who we're looking for. You're who we're looking for, and then in the next breath they're saying, as long as you say the thing that we want you to say, and they set a theme and they say this is what we want from you. And I kind of feel like if you wanted to properly give people from all these minority groups, whatever you want to call them, a voice, you actually need to listen to that voice, whatever that voice is. You actually need to allow that voice to be heard and sing its own song, not sing the song that you've written or the dance that you've choreographed, or it's got to be, you know, because really then you start to get a picture of what these people, these minorities or whatever are saying, and that causes me an issue. That I think, you know, it isn't for us to shape ourselves to fit a commission mould. It's for the mould to fit us. And, you know, if they want to hear a voice or voices or see work or whatever, or dance or whatever it is, if they want to see it as a representation of these people, then you have to allow these people to represent. You know, it isn't going to be good enough to say, as long as your theme is about the beach, or as long as it is about light, you know, it's kind of like, well, you know, you're negating the idea that these people have original ideas of their own. Even, you know, they might be doing the most exciting work on the planet, and they look through the thing and think, oh, it doesn't fit in there. And it shouldn't really be a case of fitting in. If you're saying that you want to hear from Black, gay, female, mothers, whatever, if you're saying that you're the voices you want to hear, you need to think about how you can address that commission to make sure you hear those voices and hear what they're trying to say, not the other way around. Say, oh, we want to hear from you, but in the way that we want to hear it, which is it's another form of exclusion, not inclusion.
These are my final words. We're coming towards the end. So what's next for you, Sharon? Kids are back at school, of course. We have to also see what happens with COVID, but what's next for you?
Keeping on making the work, really. That's it. That's all I can do. I have to finish my final BLM picture because it's, at the moment, it's like a shadow hanging over my head. It's just because it's got so many faces in, so I kind of have to be in the right, literally, headspace to do it, because it's really intense to sit and draw faces behind masks, you know, times 100. I'm teaching myself currently to use Procreate, which is an iPad app for drawing, so that I can work digitally on some of my images, so that I can then get images reproduced much more easily. Bridge the gap so that I can sell multiples of things, but still sell original things as well. So by teaching myself a new process, I'm hoping that I can make work. At the moment, I'm making work physically and then manipulating it digitally and then making a new thing, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm trying to learn new things to kind of, well, to think about, like you say, you know, I don't know what COVID's going to carry on bringing. I don't know how many exhibiting opportunities I'm going to get in the coming months, years. Let's be optimistic.
Thank you, Sharon, for being so open and honest with our conversation. I'd just like to find out how people can keep up to date with you, check out your work, and get in touch for those commissions.
Well, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm Sharon James Artist. I'm the same on Facebook. And if you do Sharon James Artist, I have a blog on WordPress. The keywords are Sharon James Artist, and you can find me. I'm there.
Awesome. So it just gives me one great pleasure to say thank you very much for joining me on Listen Up Podcast. And this has been Under the Radar with Sharon James. Thank you, Sharon.
You're more than welcome.
If you enjoyed this week's podcast, Under the Radar with Sharon James, hosted by Natasha Player, subscribe down below and you'll get notified when the next podcast gets released. Bye for now.